As a veteran New York Times reporter, I've witnessed many of history's painful moments. This ranks high on that list. Every week at this desert crossroads, smugglers pack thousands of desperate young people onto trucks, bound for a journey they may never survive. They come from places like Senegal, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, Gambia, but they all have one destination in common: the shores of Europe. What I want to know is how much of this massive human migration is being pushed by climate change.
This isn't the Sahara Desert. It's my home state, California. I've lived here most of my life, and I've never seen it this dry.
I look down and it looks like we're just in Brownsville.
Well, we're definitely in the worst drought in modern history.
I'm with Felicia Marcus, the state's top water official. Her board decides when and how to ration water in California.
Folsom Lake should have water in it. And as we get closer, you'll see how much is exposed. There's the dam. Oh my God! This should be full of water.
What we're over right now?
Yeah, right over here. They do dry down during the summer, but not to this. This is the drought.
Wow.
Those are floating docks. Well, they're supposed to be floating. That parking lot is usually right next to the water. And this reservoir is one of California's main water supplies.
Is this where climate change meets drought?
This is absolutely what our future looked like under climate change. We're seeing today what happens when a drought goes on for 4 years and there's no snowpack.
According to Felicia, the big fear now is a mega drought, one lasting decades. If high emissions continue, there's an 80% chance of that in the second half of this century. An 80% chance parts of our state would basically be uninhabitable.
It's the Godzilla of all wake-up calls.
The tide of migrants fleeing war-torn African and Middle Eastern countries continues to crash.
We're bang in the middle of a crisis.
Europe is suffering the worst migration crisis since World War II. Nearly 2 million people in the last year alone have been on the move. Syrian refugees dominate the headlines, but that is not the whole story. This shelter is home to migrants from Africa. I'm told its occupancy has recently doubled.
Why did you originally come? What were the forces that brought you here?
Parce qu'il n'y a rien chez nous en fait. Il n'y a pas de pluie. Et les gens ne peuvent pas rester sans manger.
No rain.
No rain.
45 degrés, 50 degrés. Comment une pluie ou bien une personne même peut vivre? C'est très difficile.
Il n'y a pas de mer, la terre ne marche plus, même tous les grands arbres sont tous morts.
There is no sea, and the earth doesn't work.
The shelter I just left is actually in a suburb of Paris. Less than a mile away, the biggest environmental talks in history are taking place. The goal is to stop the advance of man-made climate change. This is the story I came to Paris to report. But the migration crisis on its doorstep is simply impossible to ignore.
Mr. Secretary, to what extent is the European migrant crisis, which we're really now in the middle of right here in Paris, to what extent do you think that's climate-driven?
Well, there's a percentage, Tom. It's not the majority.
Because we're getting a lot of African refugees, particularly from the dry lands of Africa.
The biggest challenge globally, I think, is governance, bad governance, and corruption. It could be more climate-driven in the future, and it's a real challenge.
Many leaders acknowledge climate migration as some distant threat. But could this future already be here?
Every second, a person is now forced to flee his home because of an extreme weather or climate event. Every second.
Jan Egeland heads up the Norwegian Refugee Council,
Every year.
one of the world's first refugee organizations, now operating in 30 countries. I asked to meet with him one-on-one to hear about the changes he's been seeing.
What do you say when climate skeptics come along and say there have been droughts and floods in Africa from time immemorial? It's very difficult to prove a link between climate change and these refugee migrations.
Our figures say, and these are our scientists say, that a child born in the 1970s compared to a child born today, the child now is 60% more likely to be displaced by natural disasters. Is it going to be 200 million or 1 billion people that will have to relocate the next generation? We don't know.
Do they have rights?
No, there's no convention on climate refugees as there is for war and human rights refugees.
So if you're tortured by a dictator, you have certain rights.
Yeah.
If you're tortured by nature, you have no rights.
You no rights to seek refuge in another place. Of course, the injustice in it, those who did nothing to cause climate change are first and hardest hit. We who caused climate change are last and least hit. It's getting drier, it's getting warmer, it's getting tougher. It's a question of life and death now.
If what Jan says is right, climate migration is already happening. But will hundreds of millions really have to flee their homes by the end of this century? To find out, I'm heading to the drylands of West Africa.
Even though I've lived in Los Angeles for about 35 years now, I really don't know much about the Central Valley, the giant agricultural region just north of me. I'm amazed at its sheer size. I'm 4 hours into my drive, and there's been no break. It's farm after farm after farm, and all of them look bone dry. There are water tanks on many of the front lawns. What must it be like to work and live here? Near the town of Porterville, I meet Tom Barcelos, whose dairy farm has been here for almost 100 years. The milk he produces is made into Land O'Lakes butter. So this is it.
Yeah, canal here has been dry for going on almost 3 years with no water.
Really? What is that doing to the water that you have to use now?
The water table in the aquifer, which is the water that's below ground that we draw from, 40 years ago it was at 60 feet here. So from this ground level, if you went down 60 feet, you would hit water. Earlier this year, I drilled a new one. I went 800 feet at a cost of $150,000. Put a new pump pressure system in it at a cost of $80,000 on top of that.
Almost $250,000, and you're in a similar situation that all of your neighbors are in.
This entire valley right now has to make those kind of same decisions.
And what percentage of the food in the world comes from this area?
It's huge. You have almonds, pistachios, grapes that make raisins, grapes that make wine, citrus, alfalfa, corn.
Tom says almost half of the nation's produce comes from this valley. 80% of the world's almonds alone. This is important to the world, right? What happens worldwide to worldwide food?
If we were to lose this food supply here, I think we have a real national security problem.
A future without food. It's a frightening prospect. And one that seems far off. But what if it isn't? How are the smaller farmers doing here? The ones without the financial resources and corporate contracts to weather the drought. A few miles away, I stop in at a small oats and alfalfa farm run by Adam and Griselda Toledo.
How you doing?
Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah.
It's like a dream, having a little farm. The first year was regular year, but the second year is just horrible. The third year, well, you don't want to know about it.
Oh, really?
This is what we have left of the third year. But it used to be very nice, very green.
So where does your water come from?
Our only sources of water is our well, which 3 years ago was pumping pretty good. Now, it's not even 10% of what we had back then.
Really? Once the well dries, you don't have another option?
Not option. Nothing. That's it.
Can't go deeper?
Yes. I have
But it costs
$500,000 million
to go any deeper than it is now.
Oh yeah. Who's gonna bring up that money?
Right.
I don't want to leave, but if it doesn't rain, it just gonna be over pretty soon.
Do you ever talk about climate change or why it's happening or how it's happening?
Well, we used to have rain, we used to have snow, so we're doing something wrong. And not just me or you, everybody.
Right. How many kids do you guys have?
2 girls.
2 girls.
And we're expecting about almost 5 months.
Do you know if it's a boy or a girl?
We don't know yet. He wants a boy.
Another little farmer.
He wants
I'm struck by how fragile the Toledo situation is. Adam has the money to plant one more crop. If the rains don't come, he won't be able to make their payments, and they'll be forced from the land.
Far from the richest state in the richest country on the planet, I'm flying over one of the poorest, Niger, which I've read is the main route for Africans migrating to Europe via Libya. I'm going to a region known as the Sahel, a vast transition zone between desert and forest in Africa. I'm accompanying the UN's Monique Barbu, whose job is to save fertile land from turning into desert. As we start our descent, the pilot announces the temperature, 117 degrees Fahrenheit. It's my first time in the Sahel.
Nice to meet you. Coming out. Hi, Tom Friedman. Nice to meet you.
Leaving the airport, we're escorted by the military. Extremists from Al-Qaeda have been known to kidnap Westerners here. A centuries-old trading post, Agadez used to be one of West Africa's tourist attractions. Today it's a gateway for Africans fleeing the continent. We drive a few miles out of town to the desert crossroads.
What country?
Guinea.
And how long did it take to get here from Guinea?
Guinée, ici, une semaine. Avant, est-ce que tu venais d'un village ou tu as toujours...
Village.
So he's coming from a village. His family is still there. But he had to leave and go to Conakry.
The city.
To cities because there was no work in his village.
No work in the village.
And now he has no work in the city neither. So he's going further away.
Officials here tell me something that's hard to imagine. As many as 17,000 migrants pass through this exact spot every week. I leave the crossroads and head off to a transit center operated by the International Organization for Migration. This center provides aid to those attempting this dangerous journey.
So let me ask a question. There are all these young men here. How many people are back home who would like to come to Libya, to Europe, to Greece, to Turkey? How many would like to get out?
Man instant bi nii ñi ma wax ne dañuy dem man leen fukki nit ak ñaar ñoo xam ne chaque jour dañ may woo téléphone dama bëgg a ñëw ma ne yoon bi ñaanuma yàlla kenn mu jaar ci yoon bi mais ku fi ñëw da nga gis.
Particularly for his case.
At first I'm confused, but then I realize these guys aren't heading to the dream of Europe. They're coming back from the nightmare that is Libya.
What did you find in Libya? What was it like when you got there?
dama doon taxale maa ngi woon ci diggante dund ak dee. ba ma duggee si biir encore police yi nekk foofu bàyyiwuñ ma am jàmm. tëj ma 3 mois de prison wala 4 mois de prison.
When you're in that jail in Libya, tell us a little more. What's it like every day?
Very hard.
Matin, midi,
I was beating them.
soir, on a perdu des personnes, ils sont morts.
am na benn maas bu ñu lay teg dañ lay maas boo ngay jooy da ngay sonn sa yaram bi mooy loolu quoi dama bokk si.
Does he want to go back home now? What does he want to do? Yeah.
léegi moom ñibbi rek laa bëgg.
Instead, these young men are stuck here, persona non grata just about everywhere else. The sense of failure is palpable. I've seen this before, an emerging poverty of hope which makes them easy prey for those who have an agenda.
This year is setting record temperatures across the globe. And here in California, it's 108. Adam Toledo has money to plant one more crop of oats. If it doesn't rain, it could be his last. Meanwhile, his well has gone completely dry. The family is down to the water left in 2 giant reserve tanks.
How do you want me to save the water here in the house?
It's gonna be a little harder. Don't worry, you'll take a shower. You're not gonna take 1 hour in the shower, okay? 2 minutes and get out. Now he's playing.
Back in LA, I'm terrified so much of our nation's food supply could be at risk. I've come to NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab to find out just how bad things really are. Jay Famiglietti is one of the world's top hydrologists. He's been using satellite technology to measure the levels of the world's groundwater. Having seen what's happening in the Central Valley with these farmers and the desperate need for water, I mean, is there any hope on the horizon for them?
I think the future of agriculture in California is really at risk. Over the last few years, California's lost, something like 4 trillion gallons of water per year.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, 4 trillion with the T. And a lot of that water is used to support agriculture.
According to Jay, that's enough water to sustain all of New York, LA, and Chicago for 5 years. Can you tie this into climate change?
Absolutely. The climate models predict that as temperatures warm, the wet areas, the high latitudes and the tropics will get wetter, and that the dry areas are getting drier, and we're seeing it. So this is a map of the United States and the trends over 12 years, and the blues are places that are gaining, and the reds are places that are losing water. You see those hot spots in the Central Valley and in Texas. Those are our 2 big food-producing regions in the United States. They're talking about, in that part of Texas, running out of water in 20 or 30 years. And, then what? What are we going to do to grow food for our nation?
Is this the global story?
Unfortunately, it is around the world. The mid-latitudes, where all of the major aquifers are, they are past sustainability tipping points.
I mean, this is insane.
This is insane.
What does this mean for global food? What does this mean for how we do our agriculture now around the world?
it stands to change our food security, our energy security, our human security globally.
Are we talking about like a great migration again? I mean, is man going to have to completely pick up and move to places where...
I think yes. I mean, this is really scary stuff. Exactly. I am getting to the point where I'm not sleeping well at night.
Leaving NASA, I think about my kids who just left for college. Their future is starting to look downright apocalyptic under climate change. So what are we doing to stop it? Is anyone, at least in my state, taking charge?
I'm heading towards Dirkou, the last stop before the Libyan border. In the distance, we can see a crowd gathering by a transport truck.
Il a 17 gosses. All those people are from Niger. They are internal migrants. Où sont leurs familles?
Ils sont au village.
I have asked, here are only men, where are the families? And all of them are saying that their family stays in the village back.
How do their families survive back home without the men?
Before they left, they tried to leave enough for the family to sustain for a while. And this man was saying that he just talked to his wife, who told him that now they have finished all the crops and that now they are in the hands of God.
Now they are
in the hands of God.
Si elle n'a pas de revenus, elle va les chercher ailleurs.
Minister, what is going on in Niger in terms of the climate, the environment, that so many people would be tempted to want to go up to Libya and even beyond to Europe?
La population vit essentiellement de l'agriculture et de l'élevage. Le désert avance à grands pas. Les dunes, le sable bouge et elles envahissent nos terres agricoles. Nous avons une perte d'environ 104 000 hectares par an.
100,000 hectares?
Yes, every year.
Every year. Every year.
Wow.
Alors, c'est la base productive de nos pauvres populations qui s'amenuisent de jour en jour.
This invasion of sand dunes, has that always been part of Niger's history?
Bon, moi, quand j'étais jeune, nos parents ont toujours sémé après une pluie abondante entre le 1er et le 6 juin. Aujourd'hui, on peut avoir une pluie en avril. Il se pourrait qu'on fasse un mois sans une goutte de pluie. On peut connaître des graves inondations qui emportent presque une bonne partie des terres, qui emportent même des hommes. Donc, et ça c'est pour nous les effets du changement climatique.
Do you think we in the West are responsible for this also?
La réponse est toute simple. Mais qui pollue la planète? La grande responsabilité de la pollution de la planète relève de l'Occident. Et c'est à l'Occident de payer. C'est une question de sécurité tout court. Tout ceci va produire quoi? Notre jeunesse est sans emploi. Ils vont aller ailleurs. Ou alors, notre jeunesse répondra à la première sirène de Boko Haram ou des djihadistes.
The the siren call of extremism, with nowhere else to turn, there is that darker option. I'm seeing how conditions here might touch American lives. I wonder, do our leaders back home understand the full impact of a changing climate?
Neither California nor indeed the world can ignore the growing assault on the very systems of nature on which human beings and other forms of life depend.
7,000 miles from the deserts of Africa, there is at least one American politician who gets it.
Thank you very much.
California Governor Jerry Brown. No stranger to environmental issues, he's been battling the oil and gas industries since the 70s. And while he knows he can't fight a drought, he can fight climate change, preventing far worse droughts in the future. And Brown has a radical solution. A bill that would cut oil use in the state in half by 2030.
We use about 18 billion gallons a year of diesel and gasoline.
In California.
In California. To say we're going to cut all that in half in some way, or cut the fuel in half, how are we going to do it?
Are we up against the clock in a way that's going to make something like that have to be fast-tracked to have any success?
If we as the 7.2 billion people on planet Earth, yeah, we are up against it. I think there's now 1 billion cars in the world. There was only 300 million when I was governor 35 years ago. And we'll be up at 2 billion cars pretty soon. What I want to do in California is make sure we stay on course and set a good example so that other states, federal government, other countries will join with us. I like to do things that are big, that are significant. And working on climate change is working on something that makes a difference.
My guess is the governor is going to have a huge fight on his hands. Last year, the oil industry sold $86 billion in petroleum to Californians. I can't imagine they'll be too thrilled about the prospect of having their profits slashed, but Governor Brown plays the long game. We met a family in Porterville, the Toledo family. Their well is run dry. They may have to move.
The world is going to change. And whether you're in that valley of California or you're on the eroding coast of New Orleans and Miami, how we handle that with the millions of refugees and migrants, it's going to be really disruptive. So what you saw in Porterville, you'll just see 1,000 or 1,000,000 times more. Whether it becomes completely universal and catastrophic, that depends on how quickly we make the change.
This is what we do know. Well over 200 girls were kidnapped by heavily armed gunmen.
Boko Haram, known for mass abductions like this one, is considered one of the world's deadliest terrorist organizations. And it's been affiliated with both ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Could climate change be having an influence on the rise of extremism here?
Here I have 3 maps I wanted to show you. The first is the vulnerability to desertification in Africa. And as you can see...
It runs right through the middle of Africa.
Yeah. Here you have the food riots and where they have exploded the same year. And if you take the map of terrorist attack, Al-Qaeda type of attack, we go exactly again.
Right through the center of the continent.
Yes, this is reality.
Desert, food riots, Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
Yeah.
Same map, same places.
Exactly. You can tell me that there is no direct consequences of one of another. But denying that there is no links, this is where I am kind of stunned. By 2045, so 30 years from now, they say that 60 million people may be moving from south part of Africa below the Sahara to North Africa and to Europe. 60 million.
What you're talking about is, it's terrifying, Monique.
We have underestimated what is happening in terms of small farmers losing their natural capital. And the only natural capital that people have around here is the land.
Monique, you get to be queen for a day. You get to invest in one big solution for everything we're talking about. What would it be?
You see, today in the world, people are putting walls all over the place. And me also, I dream of a wall. But it is a wall that we have called the Great Green Wall.
Climate change is a major factor in the deterioration of soil here. The Great Green Wall would create a ribbon of restoration projects to conserve every drop of water possible and turn deserts back into fertile land. The project is almost a decade old, but it needs oversight and financing to start making headway.
You know, to restore an hectare of degraded land, it costs between $100 and $300, okay? Compared to peace, to security, to human dignity, what is it we're talking about? Not much. Not much.
60 million refugees fleeing Africa. The West can't even manage 1 million Syrians. And what's so surprising is that so many of the migrants I've met here are from Senegal. I've always thought that Senegal was one of West Africa's most stable and prosperous countries. It appears that might be changing.
Adam and Griselda Toledo have planted their make or break crop of oats. But with their well now dry and the water in their emergency tanks running low, they have to move their animals to a nearby relative's.
Hey girls, come on in. Let's go.
It's a stopgap for now. They can't spare the water. Back in LA, commercials have popped up slamming the governor's ambitious bill to cut petroleum use in half.
It's about making it harder for regular people to drive to work and drive home each day.
To find out who's behind this advertising blitz, I'm meeting up with Tom Steyer, a billionaire former hedge fund manager who now spends his money funding candidates and initiatives that fight climate change. His group, NextGen, has spent $2 million backing bills, including the governor's gas reduction measure.
Penalizing drivers for using too much gas.
Let me just stop right here.
Please.
I mean, as much money as they spend, they can't get better actors. Who is they? Who are the they that we're talking about?
In California, that is paid for by a bunch of oil companies. But the fact of the matter is they have very specific interests. They're trying to scare people. And also they spend $11 million lobbying it, just going office to office and arguing against this.
Is this something that you're seeing around the country?
The oil and gas industry in the U.S. have decided that they're going to fight and deny the problem.
How do you fight against something like that?
It's corny, but by far the biggest thing we have going for us is the truth. We're going to see the world get warmer. We're going to see cities threatened. We're going to see climate refugees around the world, which we're already seeing.
Yeah.
To the extent that we don't get legislation in Washington, then the change is going to have to come at the states.
But I hear that up in Sacramento, oil lobbyists are having success getting legislators to echo their ideas.
Nobody ever says, oh my gosh, I want to pay higher gas prices.
This measure will lead to substantial increases in the cost of energy in California and will hurt families who live in our most disadvantaged communities.
We need to stop regulating. We need more free market.
Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen. Aye. Anderson. No. Bates. No. Bell. No. Stone. No. Vidak. No. Wachowski. Aye. Wolk. No. Pan. Aye. Papley.
A defeat now for Governor Jerry Brown in his efforts fighting global warming.
No state, no nation has ever tried this, to use the government to force a drastic reduction in gas consumption by drivers in California. About an hour ago, the governor announced he has pulled that idea.
Oil has won a skirmish, but they've lost the bigger battle because my zeal has been intensified to a maximum degree, and nothing is going to stop this state from pushing forward on our low carbon fuel standard and all the rest. California will continue to lead.
One more question. I mean, do the oil companies...
Decisions made in our backyard impact backyards all across the globe. I'm at Senegal's Meteorological Authority, meeting with the head of their climate division, Dr. Ousmane Jai.
Hey, Dr. Jai, Tom Friedman.
In Niger, I heard a lot about how the desert is devouring farmland, but I need to know the science behind it.
How was it?
Hot.
Really?
Hot.
Okay, let me show you something. As you can see here, you see the temperature variability over year to year. Temperature is going up and up and up. And actually, we have observed a difference of 2 degrees Celsius.
Between here and here is 2 degrees.
2 degrees.
You know, Dr. Jai, when we were at the Paris Climate Conference, the whole objective of that conference was that the world should get together and prevent a 2 degrees centigrade rise in average temperature. What you're telling me is, here in Senegal, you've already hit the 2 degrees.
Exactly. We are living it.
Dr. Jai tells me Senegal is a sign of things to come. Different regions warm at different rates, but the world's average temperature has been fairly steady, even dropping slightly of late. Ever since the Industrial Revolution, though, it's shot up. The global average has risen a full degree Celsius, and scientists warn just 1 more degree would be catastrophic.
So what impact has that had on agriculture and farming here?
It has a huge impact. And you see that in the plant here, when the temperature rises, the plant needs and demand more water. So that means in those conditions, will be more and more difficult.
I see, so the hotter it gets, the more water the plants
exactly needs, yes. And the rainfall is now diminishing more and more due to climate change.
What happens down the road?
Let me show you something.
Dr. Jai shows me a climate model developed by leading scientists.
In 2010, when we were thinking forward what will happen, and the worst scenario was the red one, we were thinking this is something that we will not have, of course. And actually we are following the red one.
So we're talking about a temperature rise, average temperature, of over 4 degrees.
Yes, at the end of the century.
Mother of God, I cannot imagine what it would be like to live in Senegal at that end of the extreme range.
Yeah, it will be very difficult, very challenging for them. With limited resources, it will be very difficult.
I'm having a hard time grappling with the fact that this massive, once fertile farmland is starting to look more like a Saharan landscape. But it has rained some in the Central Valley, and Adam Toledo's crop of oats may have a fighting chance. But his reserve tanks have completely run out, leaving the house entirely without water. He has 1 day off a week, and he spends it making trips back and forth to his parents' home to get water. It takes 10 trips like this and his entire day to fill the tanks. And it's barely enough to last the month. Griselda is now 8.5 months pregnant.
I think I'm pretty close to spray it for the weeds. If we get another 2 or 3 rains, we're gonna make it.
What if it doesn't rain?
Keep on trying. You cannot just let it go that easy. One day it has to rain. Maybe we're gonna think about moving or something.
Moving where? And all the work and money and everything.
That's something that we have to think about it. But we'll see.
I never expected my first night in Senegal to be my first rap concert. This country has long been considered one of the few stable democracies in West Africa. But many of the men I kept meeting in the desert in Agadez came from here. The rapper's name is Matador. He's a huge star here. His song is called Tuki, which means to leave, to travel. Matador's message is to stay. Better to be poor and help develop your own country than to be a poor stranger in a strange land. The next day, not far from the concert venue, my guide, Adam C., brings me to this market to meet one of the young men Matador sings about.
I'm going to take you to my friend, one of the millions of young people in Senegal who are hustling, just trying to survive. Assalamu alaikum. Jili. Safa.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
I learned that he left his farming village 4 years ago and became a street seller. Every day now, for 14 hours, he mans his stall selling trinkets.
How much can he make in a day here?
Sometimes he can earn something like 1,000, sometimes 1,500 francs CFA.
So maybe a couple dollars a day he can make. And out of that he has to pay his rent, food, and support his brothers and sisters. When we went to Matador's concert, he kept using that word tuki in his rap, leaving, migrating. Does Jili want a tuki? No future here? Would he like to go back to his village? Can we go see his village?
If you want, we can go to his village.
Jili's village is a 4-hour drive north. I'm finally going to get a chance to see for myself what's actually happening to the farmland here. I hoped Jili would come with us, but he simply can't spare the time off work. On the way, Adams tells me it's the dry season, but as we get closer, it's far more than just dry. It's a wasteland. I'm reminded of something the migrants in Paris told me. The earth doesn't work here. By the time we arrive, we're in the midst of a sandstorm.
Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum salam.
Do you know a man named Jili? We met him in Dakar, and we wanted to come and see his village and why he left. I wonder if you could help us.
He's inviting us to his house.
Wonderful.
The young man's name is Serene,
I'm Tom.
and he shares his last name with Jili and the village where they were both born.
His wife.
Oh, nice to meet you.
His mother.
Mother.
Come to sit down, please.
Thank you. Serene, when you were growing up, this is just powder. Was the earth like that here? Serene, of the young men you grew up with, how many are still here in the village?
Serene's remaining family gathers around us in the courtyard. His mother tells me that of her 5 sons, Serene is the only one left at home.
Serene, why didn't you leave?
demoon naa mais dafa metti tamit.
What country did you go to?
ban dëkk nga demoon.
Espagne. juróom benn at laa fa dëkk ndax maa ngi fa dem le 5 octobre 2003 jóge fa le 29 juin 2009 boobu laa fa jógee.
What did you do when you were in Europe?
liggéey yëpp def naa ko daanaa def ferrailleur daanaa jaay ay seede ci mbedd mi. Des fois daanaa fekk ay tubaab yoo xam ne ñu yor lu diis ma jël ko gàddu leen ko ñu fay ma. te aw ma fu woon yaakaar daal parce que comme que li ma la wax léegi rek am naa benn capacité intellectuelle parce que moo gën may nekk foofa di souffrir daal du ma gis sama yaay du ma gis sama baay samay waa kër du ma ci gis kenn te xaw naa fa yàgg moo tax ma bàyyi ko tamit ñëw.
I've seen many Syrenes on the streets of Europe, but I have never been to the place they call home. As I sit in my car, protected from the heat and desperation, I know that for Cyrene, there is no air-conditioned escape.
It's spring in the Central Valley. The rainy season has come and gone, but it wasn't enough. Adam Toledo's oat crop has failed. Now, he's selling what remains of last season's crop to help pay the bills. With drought ravaging not just the Toledos, but the entire state, Governor Brown is more determined than ever to find a solution.
There are many things we can do together. The transformation to a low-carbon world can be an occasion for increasing the quality of our lives.
After losing his showdown with the oil industry, he's been on an international warpath, drumming up support wherever he can.
The achievements made by California has made a great contribution for the China-US cooperation on climate change.
He even forms his own international climate pact, signed not by countries, but by cities and states to take action without waiting for their national governments.
We're building a real force, a global force, to reduce carbon emissions and protect the well-being of people everywhere.
With renewed support, he returns home.
Governor, any news on transportation?
And this time manages to negotiate a new bill with the oil industry. One that will slash statewide emissions by 40% in 15 years.
California is doing something that no other state has done. You're putting into law real measures backed up by the real power of the state of California.
It's an historic moment. But it comes too late for the Toledo family. Fed up with life without water and unable to make their payments, Adam and Griselda have left the farm. Thanks to the generosity of a neighbor, they're living rent-free for now. And with a new member of the family, Daisy.
Mommy, do you like your new house? Do you? Are you happy in here? Are you? Yes, I know you are. Huh. We had a dream of having a little farm, and we had it. We had 4 years over there. But if we sit here and talk about that, we're gonna end up crying. But just imagine, like, this generation is gonna be worse and worse, because what make you think it's gonna get better?
While some towns back home have just begun to experience climate migration, Adams has brought me to a village in Senegal that's feeling its full brunt.
What is it like to have so many of your husbands and sons out of the village your whole life? Thank you.
sonn rek lañ fi nekk man sama njaboot ni ngi ci àll kii wopp na daaw bari ba mu demee dugg ma nga Espagne dafa feebar kii kenn ki mu ngi ci booru naar yooyu moo Libi waaw ma nga feebar.
An older man gets up to tell me that his son also left for Libya more than a year ago.
No news. It's very painful.
I don't have the heart to tell him I was just near the Libyan border. I think of those young men getting ready to cross the desert. So many die along the way. Their bodies never found, their deaths never recorded.
di indi ci sàqee di semb di sunu yaay di ko bojji nu ko nuy dunde léegi njaboot yëpp dañ fi nekk ku ne sa kër say doom nekk ci ñu béy di indi ci kër yi dunde waaw maanaam nii bu dañul fee day yàqu ndax dootuñu fi mën a toog duna am lu dunde dañuy mujj na ànd ak sunuy doom daw rek dem ci yeneen dëkk ndax wuti lu dunde
I came here with a big question, and I found my answer. Migrants are leaving Africa for many reasons, but the ones I met aren't fleeing war. They're fleeing a land that will no longer support them, made worse by a man-made condition they did nothing to cause. As these villages dissolve, I remember there could be anywhere from 200 million to 1 billion climate migrants by the end of the century. This is just the beginning. Whether this trickle becomes a flood is up to us.